How we doing, folks? Your host Moose here on the Pitt Panthers Football Network as we welcome you to our Season 4 NCAA College Football Playoff Reveal Show. Of course, the final two spots in the College Football Playoff were seemingly up for grabs. The College Football Playoff Committee deliberated over those teams and made what may end up turning out to be a slightly controversial decision. But we can see now that UAB will be in the College Football Playoff. They've earned the 4 seed and the right to play undefeated, top-ranked LSU in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl for the right to go to the national championship game. On the other side of the bracket, Ohio State, of course, as everyone expected, earned the number 2 spot. And the Pitt Panthers, as champions of the ACC at 11-2, have earned the number 3 seed to get into the College Football Playoff for the second consecutive year. And you can see the results of the College Football Playoff Committee's blind resume decision. UAB as Team C and Pitt as Team D were the overwhelming majority of the votes. Alabama did have a good shout. They were Team A. The least amount of consideration went to Texas, who was Team B, and it really came down to UAB versus Alabama, who deserved the right to get in, and the committee decided to go with undefeated UAB, though if they end up losing to LSU, it may really put a damper on any potential future possibility for Group of 5 teams to make the College Football Playoff. But the remainder of the New Year's Six Bowls were released. Penn State, as the number 2 Big Ten team, will take on number 24 Oregon, who is the Pac-12 champion. The Orange Bowl will see at-large Auburn as the number 3 SEC school, technically playing at-large number 2 ACC NC State. Sugar Bowl will be a huge game between the two teams that didn't make the playoff in Bama and Texas showing down. And then the Cotton Bowl will see Oklahoma as the number 2 Big 12 school taking on USC, who is an at-large, the number 2 school coming out of the Pac-12. So if you take a look through the entire bowl matchups, obviously you can pause at any time and look for your favorite team. Some big bowl matchups that are going to be of interest, though. You definitely have, of course, the New Year's Six, which is going to be very good. Florida versus Wake seems to be a very interesting bowl that I like. Ohio's bowl game against Lafayette's going to be a good one. You've got Oklahoma State versus UCLA in the Alamo Bowl. Houston versus Washington, last year's national champion, in the Kraft Fight Hunger Bowl. Some interesting and tasty matchups that are definitely going to take place throughout the entirety of the bowl season. But we will talk about now the awards around the country. Of course, if you saw in our last NCAA recap show that Joe Burrow did win the Heisman. Very, very impressive season for Mr. Burrow, leading LSU to an undefeated record. 54 total TDs, 47 passing, and 7 rushing. Almost 4,000 yards passing. He'll hit that number for sure in his next game. And he won in a very convincing fashion. Felipe Franks of Florida ended up being second in the voting. His teammate Nick Brossette of LSU ended up being third. Tommy Stevens of Penn State, 4th, and Kendall Hinton of Wake Forest was 5th. And you can see Burrow, as we're going to show the rest of the awards here, clean sweep of all the major awards for Joe Burrow. 173.4 quarterback rating, only 5 picks against 47 touchdowns, over 300 yards a game passing. He just racked up the yardage, 67% completion percentage, which was spectacular. He wins the Heisman, he wins the Maxwell, he wins the Walter Camp, and he wins the Davey O'Brien. Maxwell and Walter Camp and the Heisman, all different awards for best player in the country. And then, of course, the O'Brien Award goes for the best quarterback in the country. You can see he was impressive. 7 rushing touchdowns, only 25 yards a game rushing. Not obviously his forte, but he did what he needed to do. He even had a rushing touchdown in the SEC championship game, which was the one game he didn't throw for a passing touchdown. But incredible season for Burrow. I think you can look through his stat line, just see how dominant he was this season. It was really incredible to see a stat line like that. Now, there's some other quarterbacks that had really good seasons. Felipe Franks, who I actually wouldn't have probably put second in my vote, but he had a very good season in his first full year as Florida's starting quarterback. You can see 208 passing yards a game, 31 touchdowns against 4 interceptions, and he ran for 10 touchdowns and 62 yards a game as well. So he put up probably 275 yards of offense and 41 touchdowns in 12 games this season. So a pretty impressive year for Franks. Nick Brossette, LSU's starting running back, incredible year for him. Almost 100 yards per game rushing, 16 touchdowns, 1,250 yards rushing, and he also showed what a threat he is out of the backfield as well. Almost 30 catches for nearly 400 yards and 3 touchdowns there. So 19 total touchdowns for Brossette. Really impressive performance as a compliment to Joe Burrow. And he earned 3rd in the vote. Tommy Stevens, Penn State's senior starting quarterback, his first season as a starter, as Trace McSorley, of course, had led the Nittany Lions for the last 3 years, and it was a good one from Stevens. 35 touchdowns against just 7 picks. 275 yards passing a game. And I thought, to be honest, he was more impressive than Frank. So obviously, Frank's had the rushing touchdowns, but Stevens averaged almost as many yards per game rushing. Didn't have the touchdowns, only 3 touchdowns, but 35 touchdowns passing, a few more interceptions, but his team ended up with a better record. So I thought Stevens was impressive. My number 2, to be honest, was Kendall Hinton. With the team he was playing with in Wake Forest, very good offensively skilled team, but Kendall Hinton, the season he put up was just ridiculous. 278 yards a game passing, 31 touchdowns against just 6 picks. Incredible job airing out the football. And then he also ran for 10 touchdowns on the season, similar to Felipe Franks, but I thought the way that Kendall Hinton did it was just so much more impressive. More yards per game average than what Franks was able to do. Didn't have necessarily the complete level of talent around him at Wake as you would have at Florida. So I thought Hinton deserved a little bit better in terms of the vote. He would have been my number 2 behind Burrow, but I don't think there was any real worry because Burrow was going to win regardless. So after that, it was really just prestigious moving around to see who could have pulled in any other awards. Now, we'll go through the rest of the awards, and you will see some Pitt Panthers bring home some hardware impressively enough. Maxwell, of course, was led by Joe Burrow. No doubt about that. Franks and Hinton followed him up. Interestingly enough, 4th in the vote, Jason Pellerin, USC transfer quarterback, transferred from Ole Miss this year and took over at USC. He's one of the big reasons why they went from 0-12 last year to 10-2 this year and have a New Year's 6 bowl berth. Incredible season for him. Burrow, of course, wins the Walter Camp again. This is most outstanding player in the country. Typically, it's an offensive player that usually gets these awards. Burrow, number 1. You can see a few running backs got into it in terms of that. Now, Pitt Panthers, Paris Ford brings home the Bednarik Award. It's an incredible season he's had. Best defensive player in the country, no doubt about it. 85 tackles, leads the Panthers. Absolutely incredible season he's had. 4 picks. He's taken 2 of them back to the house for touchdowns. 4 passes defended as well. Forced a fumble, recovered a different fumble, so 2 different plays that he was involved in there. So he's been a part of 6 turnovers, created 2 touchdowns, and has just been all over the field for the Panthers. Ben Davis, 2nd in the voting. Malik Young of Miami, 3rd, and you can take a look at some of the other big names in there. The players I like pointing out, though, are the players that if you're a true junior or below in terms of years, so like Justin Carter here from LSU, if you're a true junior or below, that's a player that is recruited, has been recruited, and is going through, like Paris Ford, to be honest. He was a recruit, a player that we brought in. So the fact that he's progressed to 93 overall already, that's as a recruit. So he's had incredible development. Nagurski Award as another best defensive player in the country award. Instead, this time goes to Ben Davis because I think this one, the way that it's now any defensive player, but it's limited to front 7 players in the game. And so Patrick Jones, our standout defensive end, finished 2nd in that voting. But Ben Davis of Alabama, as best linebacker in the country, ends up winning that award for best front 7 defensive player. O'Brien Award, of course, best quarterback in the nation. Joe Burrow wins that again, no question about that. John Jacobs of UAB, interestingly enough, down there at 12th. He'll be facing off with Burrow in the Peach Bowl to try and go to the national championship. Doak Walker is the best running back in the country. Incredibly enough, Brossette finished 8th in the voting for this. Stephen Davis Jr. of Auburn wins that because Auburn, they played like a triple option. Or more of a spread option, to be honest. They didn't really run a triple option, but they ran like a spread option. And so he racked up rushing yards and touchdowns, had a great season, and performed really well for Auburn to win that. Diamond Lee of UCLA wins the Biletnikoff Award. Good season, 58 receptions, over 1,000 yards, and a bunch of touchdowns. But if you take a look at the stat line here when we get to number 4, N'Keal Harry of Arizona State was absolutely robbed of this award. 82 receptions, 1,400 yards, and 11 touchdowns on the season. How he does not win the Biletnikoff Award is an absolute travesty. That was the biggest award snub of the entire awards release, I will have to say. And N'Keal Harry, he's the Biletnikoff winner in my mind, for sure. Mackey Award is the best tight end. Will Holt, can't really have any issues with that. 56 catches, 11 touchdowns, great season. There were some other guys that maybe had some similar resumes that deserved it. Werner from Georgia had, I think, 70-plus catches, so he could have been in the running for it, but good season regardless. Chidi Okeke from LSU wins the Outland Trophy as best offensive lineman. Very good season for him. Brandon Kennedy, I thought maybe deserved it. 36 pancakes against just 4 sacks allowed for Alabama. He probably had a good shout for the award as well. But I'm not going to get too worked up over offensive line awards. Remington is the best center, goes to Zach Okun of Oregon. 32 pancakes, 4 sacks allowed. Very good season for him. And, of course, you see a lot of the guys in there are seniors and stuff like that have had plenty of time to develop on the offensive line. Now, a great award for us, the Lombardi Award. Patrick Jones, best defensive lineman in the country. unbelievable where he came out of this year. He had a huge offseason growth spurt. You remember we do our random progression. He was one of the 2 guys that got additional progression, and he just turned into an absolute monster. 8 sacks, but the biggest thing for him, where I thought he was more impressive than some of our other guys that had more sacks than him, 22 tackles for a loss, 40 tackles. He was all over the field. He was our number 1 tackler from the defensive line position. So in addition to forcing pressure on the quarterback, he was just incredible at stopping, running attacks, getting players when they were out in space, and just had a really great season as far as that was concerned. Best linebacker, of course, goes to Ben Davis from Alabama. The redshirt junior had a great year. We know that he won some other fantastic awards, in the Nagurski Award as best front 7 defensive lineman. So well deserved for him. No linebackers in there for us, unfortunately. But the Thorpe Award, our defense was sensational. And the big reason why we were so improved was our defensive backs. Our defensive backs have improved over the 4 seasons to where we're really well defending against the pass, which is typically tough to do for any defense. And we've been so impressive. Paris Ford, of course, wins the Thorpe Award. So he wins the Bednarik Award as Best Defensive Player in the country, and then he wins the Thorpe Award as Best Defensive Back in the country. Some other players that I thought were interesting. Justin Carter from LSU was spectacular for them. Felipe Motley and Jazzy Stalker in for the Thorpe Award as well. I think it helps that they had a lot of tackles. Stalker, of course, had a pick 6 in the game against Miami as well, 107-yard pick 6 return that I'm sure helped him out in the voting. Felipe Motley had a good year from the slot. He had a bunch of sacks and things like that, which really helped push him up as well. I thought DeMar Hamlin and Dane Jackson really deserve more consideration. DeMar Hamlin had a bunch of interceptions. I think he has 6 interceptions on the season, so I thought he deserved a little bit more consideration there. Groza Award, Jay Bump finishes behind the Blankenship from Georgia, Rodrigo Blankenship. Well deserving of the award, but I thought Jay Bump had a great season as well. So the true junior ends up second in Groza voting. Maybe as a senior, he has an opportunity to win that award, which will be fantastic for us. And Guy Award goes to DJ Swain of Ohio State, who will be punting against Pitt, of course, in the Fiesta Bowl to try and get the right to the NCAA College Football Playoff National Championship game. Our punter, Eric Fox, isn't in the top 12, but I thought he had a great season, and definitely will get some recognition in the ACC at least, even if he doesn't get around the country. A.J. Turner for Virginia Tech ends up winning Best Returner. The transfer from South Carolina had a very good season for the Hokies as their number 2 running back and number 1 kick and punt returner. So those are the awards around the country. Let me know what you thought of some of the winners. Of course, great for us to see some recognition as we head forward into the college football playoff. Let me know. We will have, you don't have to give me your predictions for the college football playoff just yet, because we will have one more episode coming up before the actual game where we take on Ohio State. We'll have a preview episode of Pitt versus Ohio State, as well as LSU versus UAB, and then we can talk about who we're predicting to get into the college football playoff national championship. So as always, guys, thank you so much for your participation in the poll. You saw there were 50 votes at the time of me taking the screenshot, and I think it may even be past that now at this point. So I really appreciate all the participation and all the input. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hail to Pitt. We'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.